Welcome to the Tradie Wife Life podcast, brought to you by Tradies in Business, where we talk to tradie wives about their goals, their challenges, their hopes and dreams, and how their trade business can help with that. Welcome back, listeners. You are with Tradie Wife Life podcast, and we have a fantastic guest today. This one's, I think it's going to be a great piece to make you aware of what it's like to live rurally. We have quite a few members that live in what I think they would determine to be quite rural. And then when I think about what rural could look like, it's far broader than many of our members. We have the founder, I think would be the right term. Steph, can you help me with your surname, please?
Trethewey, Steph Trethewey. I'm the founder and CEO of Motherland.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining me. Lovely to have you on the show. Steph, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? You live in Tasmania, but you didn't always live there. How did you come to be living in Tassie?
Yeah, so I am originally from Sydney, a city girl, and in my former life, I was a TV journalist. So I worked for Channel 7 and Channel 9 around the country for shows like A Current Affair, chased a lot of dodgy people down the street, some dodgy tradies. That's a bit awkward. But yeah, I did thrive in that sort of career. I loved it. I worked for the 6 o'clock news, Today Show. And long story short, I was living in central Queensland, managing the 7 News bureau up there, based in Rockhampton. And I interviewed my now husband for the 6 o'clock news. It was a very slow news day, and I was looking for a story, and he'd been flown up. He was living in Victoria at the time. He's a farmer. He'd been flown up to be a guest speaker at an agriculture event. I interviewed him, and the rest is history. And that was nearly 11 years ago that I interviewed him for that story. So now we're living on a beef farm in central North Tassie together with our 2 kids.
So a huge change in pace for you with your lifestyle, moving from being a reporter. I can imagine there was a lot of travel involved, very fast-paced kind of career, to living on a farm, which is not without its struggle and its pace at times, though very different. Can you explain to us what it was like for you, I guess maybe to make a decision to move and change your life quite so dramatically?
The decision was really easy to make. So we were actually living in Melbourne at the time. My husband's a 3rd-generation Tassie farmer, but he was working in agribusiness, in agri-finance when I met him. So he was very much a farmer in a suit and also had mud on his boots on a weekend at his dad's farm. And so we were in Melbourne at the time, and he wanted to go home. He wanted to come home to Tassie to start his own business, to take all his learnings, business learnings, and really put that into our own vertically integrated beef business. And I joke, but literally the only preparation I did was watch Farmer Wants a Wife. I was so excited to move here. It was idyllic. I'd visited Tassie many times. It was beautiful. And those TV shows really paint a really romanticized version of life on the land. So I had no idea what I'd signed up for until we got here. My son was 6 months old when we moved here, and I was already kind of struggling with motherhood. That had turned my world upside down. I was a fish out of water. I was struggling with postnatal depression, with my identity. And then we moved here, and overnight I lost my village. I had no family, no friends, no mother's group, no connection, and living on a few hundred acres, with the nearest town only 15 minutes away, our small town. But for me, that was like, you may as well dropped me in the Sahara Desert. Like, it was just such a shock going from a capital city. So that's kind of how the journey began, is that isolation really hit me like a ton of bricks. And when my son was about 8 or 9 months old, I had this moment where, my husband would leave for work every day, the front door would close, and I was all smiles, and then the door would shut, and I just burst into tears because I just thought how lucky he was to be free while I was at home on the farm with the baby, really struggling. And I couldn't find any organisation sharing the stories of rural mums who were struggling, who would make me realize that I wasn't alone, that living on the land and raising kids on the land was isolating for some and tough. And so that's where the idea for Motherland was born. So I had a moment where we've all heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and we've all heard that. And I thought, well, where the hell is mine? And I decided to do something about it. So that's why I created Motherland. And thank God I did, because it is my 3rd baby. I joke, but it is. And it's really sort of saved me and enabled me to support other women and change lives for rural women across Australia too.
Steph, given that you were going through so much at the time, how did you have the foresight to start to gather what has turned into Motherland?
It's a good question. I don't know why it is my brain works like this, but I'm an entrepreneur. That's how I would describe myself. And I think that I'm the type of person that where I see adversity, I also see an opportunity for innovation.
Mm.
And I really believe that the shittest things that happen to us can sometimes be the making of us, not just the breaking of us. And that's what happened with me. So I suppose it was a decision. I either continue down this dark path of really awful mental health. I don't know where I'd be now. Or I do something about it. And I'm a big believer in no one's coming to save you. Whatever you're struggling with, whether your business is struggling, whether your marriage is struggling, whether you're struggling mentally, no one is coming to save you, and it's no one else's responsibility to save you. You are responsible for your own happiness and your own health.
Mhm.
And I had to stop playing victim. So it was a decision to get off my ass and see, okay, this is the card. These are the cards I've been dealt. I'm isolated. The farm's beautiful. I have a happy, beautiful husband and a beautiful child. Yes, I'm struggling, but where are the gaps in this scenario? Like, I'm struggling. I can't be the only one struggling, And so I started doing my research and found that, yeah, there was no one doing this for rural mums, no one supporting rural mums. So I think it just came from maybe just this entrepreneur within and a place of desperation to find happiness again and to help others. So yeah, that's sort of how it all started.
Steph, in my experience, I've got 5 kids. And in my experience talking to my own village, it's pretty rare that we're comfortable enough to put up our hand and say we're struggling and ask for help. Was that, I'm not sure whether you necessarily asked for help, but creating this opportunity for rural mums, I think is very much like asking for help. It's creating the support network that you required. Do you find that some of the mums that you talk to early on find it very challenging to actually say, look, I need help or I'm struggling, this is hard?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems we have with motherhood and parenthood is that society paints motherhood in particular as the greatest gift of all, the best thing you'll ever do. Before you pop that baby out, you feel the weight of the expectations of what that experience should be like for you.
Mm.
And when it doesn't play out that way, when it doesn't look like an Instagram reel, you feel like you're failing.
Mm.
And the problem with that is how do you encourage women to speak up about their struggles if they feel that expectation and that pressure and they feel like they should love it? What is wrong with me? I'm a bad mom. I have 2 healthy kids. Why am I not loving every minute? And I think social media has a lot to answer for in that regard, and just society in general. So I always say that, yes, the kids are the best thing I've ever done, but they're also the worst thing I've ever done. And I say that with tongue in cheek, is that it is possible to love something and struggle with something at the same time. They're not exclusive of each other. And so I think that that's what we really encourage with Motherland, is that vulnerability. And I think that by me sharing my own struggles and just telling it like it is, you can probably gather that's the type of person I am. Life is short. I don't really care about, people say, oh, you're so raw and you're so honest. And I don't really know how else to be now. I don't see any downside of being vulnerable and showing a bit of belly, because that's my life, and life is short and you never know when it's going to end. So you may as well just go all in. And so by taking that culture through Motherland, it, I think, helps our community and the women who come through our program, which is something we offer, just strip away all that pressure and just really open up in a safe place to other rural mums who are in the same boat. And I think that vulnerability is the most underrated quality that we don't teach enough of, we don't talk about enough. And it is a really big part of good mental health. So I'm very passionate about that.
So one of the things I find with mums, particularly as they start their journey, it's a particularly tough time because it feels like there's so much judgment, whether it's just ourselves holding our ideal image up to the Instagram reels that you were mentioning before, or whether it's the perception of judgment from our partner or our families or that support network that we have. How do you keep the judgment outside of your community?
That's a good question. I mean, for me personally, I think, again, everyone's really responsible for the information that they ingest. So for me personally, I really focus my social media efforts with Motherland. I don't, pay attention to accounts that don't fuel joy in me. If I come across something that makes me feel a bit, or comparison culture, I unfollow. Like that's been a really important part of my own journey. But within our community, I mean, I can't control what other people do or don't do when it comes to judging others. All I can do is create a really safe, non-judgmental space. Social media is a tricky platform to navigate, but we capture women into our community through multiple channels. So it's not just social media. We've got Motherland Village, which is Australia's first online rural mothers group program, and that's where we take women into their own personalised support groups, a really private, safe, facilitated space for rural mums with kids all the way up to the age of 18. And there's no place for judgment there. Judgment is not welcome. It is not encouraged. And it is all about just really being honest and supporting each other and making those meaningful connections. I think lots of mums have potentially lots of friends, but I always say it's quality over quantity. And I think that when you become a mum, you know, your time can be more poor. It is obviously more time poor. I've become more protective of my time and therefore protective of who I let into that inner circle. And so I think, again, it comes back to you're responsible for your own happiness. You're responsible for who you surround yourself with. And in Motherland is just doing our bit to make sure that our space is as non-judgmental and safe as possible.
Can you take us through those early days? Like, you clearly had a vision to create a village. How did you get from the thought right through to where you are today?
So Motherland Village came from another problem that I had, which was I didn't have access to a mother's group. I had my second baby, Evie, in the pandemic. It took me by surprise that I struggled mentally after her. I thought, you know, second time around, I've done this before, but I struggled again. And I did some research. So I conducted a very simple survey through Motherland of hundreds of rural mums around the country. Over 50% said that they didn't have access to a mother's group, and over 80% said that feeling lonely or isolated is the hardest part of being a rural mum on the land. So taking that data, there was a clear problem, and I thought, well, what's the solution? Women don't have access to a physical mother's group, but can I create a virtual program? So that's where the idea for Motherland Village was born. So we've been running that program for coming up to 3 years, and we've had over 300 women through the program since. And you know, we've created all these amazing virtual villages, not just for women with babies. I think that's also something I want to be clear about, is parents think that they're out of the trenches once the nappies end, and that is not the case. You know, the challenges change; they don't go away. And so I wanted to create an innovative program that supported mums with older kids. So we've got women in our program who have teenagers at boarding school, for example. They still need support. They still deserve connection, and they still deserve a mother's group. So yeah, that's why we are so passionate about what we do with the program.
I think that's a great point that you have shared there. I have a couple of girlfriends that live very rurally. They've got to fly to get anywhere. They have little planes and fly into town to do a big shop from time to time, but all their kids are at boarding school. And I think it must be such an isolating time for them, because they do School of the Air right up till high school. So they're getting some connection through the School of the Air. But then after that point in time, they lose their kids. They're gone for long periods of time during the school terms. Very hard for them to create that support network, particularly if other mums that understand exactly what they're going through. I have no understanding of what it's like to send a child off to boarding school, so I can't necessarily give the right support without that understanding. I think it's fantastic that there's a community where they have those similar experiences to be able to share.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, finding people who know what it's like to walk a day in your shoes is really important. I certainly avoid giving any advice or commenting on scenarios that I haven't lived myself. I think that's really important. I think that when it comes to parenthood, it's really easy just to jump in and give advice without you actually having a bloody clue what that person is going through. And sometimes it is better to just to shut up and just to say, I'm really sorry, that sounds really bloody hard. Can I do anything to help you? Not, oh, you know, have you thought about doing this? Or I reckon, or I imagine it's like this. It's like, well, no, you can't imagine. So I'm really mindful of that. I don't have kids at boarding school and hopefully never will. But I certainly speak to a lot of these women. And yes, it's a new chapter of life, being an empty nester with a 13-year-old at boarding school, not an 18-year-old who's left the house, but a 13-year-old, which is so young. It's still a baby. These are children. They're kids. And so, yeah, that is really hard for the kids and for the parents. And it can be heartbreaking for a lot of rural families. Sometimes it's the best thing they've ever done. So, yeah, you know, building this community where other rural mums can talk about this stuff is so important, because raising kids in the city versus on the land is chalk and cheese. You can't compare them. I don't want to compare them. So building that community for rural mums where they feel seen is really important.
Can you help us understand some of those differences? Maybe not as a comparison point, but I think when we live in a city, we're only thinking about what we're going through. We're not necessarily thinking about what our fellow women in the country are going through. And it is a very different journey with very different parenting points. Can you share some of those for us?
Yeah, it is. And I want anyone who's in the city listening to understand it's not about comparing who's got it tougher or anything like that. But I do want to go into back for rural Australia, which is if you eat food,
Mhm.
which we all do,
Yeah.
chances are that food has come from a family farm like mine. So over 90% of farms in Australia are family owned and operated. So whatever you decide to eat, farmers and the mental health of farming families is actually in your interest. And rural mums are often the glue holding those households together.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that point. But when it comes to the challenges, I've just mentioned Mothers Group, such a simple luxury that women in the city take for granted. I was automatically allocated one when my son was like 6 or 8 weeks old in Melbourne. Couldn't believe that so many women in rural Australia don't. Makes sense when you think about it because they're geographically isolated, although some of them are near a local town and they just don't have that service. So things like that social connection, childcare, a huge one. The amount of my friends who simply do not have access to childcare because it is hours away or because there is one in the local town, not, thousands in Melbourne, one, and the wait list might be 2 years.
Yeah.
So childcare is directly, correlated to mental health because if you've got women struggling
Yeah.
and they just want that reprieve, that's a red flag. Or women like me who want to work and who need to work also makes it very difficult when you don't have childcare. So that's another huge one. When it comes to the seasonal pressures, when your family's mood and mental health is reliant on Mother Nature, that is a really difficult place to be. I don't think people realize what it's like to wake up in the morning during winter knowing that you've had too much rain, paddocks are flooded, cattle are just making a meal out of it, and you're losing feed. You're having to feed out hay and silage, which can cost hundreds of dollars a bale, depending on where you live, what time of the year it is. So the financial stress, drought, floods, fires, these are all the things that our families are dealing with. I've got friends in South Australia right now really struggling with drought conditions. No one's talking about it. I think, in the media, we see, the media picks and chooses when they want to, I guess, amplify rural Australia's struggles. I think the media, and I've been there and guilty of it, is, we constantly talk about rural Australia when it's in the media for all the wrong reasons and for the heartbreaking reasons that they pull at heartstrings. I get that, but there's, the world keeps ticking. Once those stories die off, those families are still out there feeding you. Families like mine. And so, yeah, like I will go into bat for my people having lived in both worlds. And I think that's the thing, right? Is I'm not here sitting here as a farmer who has no idea what it's like living in the city. I am born and bred city girl. I lived in the city for my whole life up until I was 29. So yeah, I think that I'm well placed to comment on both worlds and the respect I have for the families, the farming families. I cannot tell you how much respect I have for them. I am living it. But to hear their stories on what they go through in a normal week and the challenges that they face that people in the city don't is just on another level. And so I think that, so much love and passion for rural Australia because that's what keeps the wheels turning for all of us.
It's an extremely challenging business model being a farmer. I can't imagine there's so little you can actually control because you're so reliant on the weather. And again, having not ever lived in that situation, I can only begin to imagine just how stressful that must be. And that alone must be a great opportunity for community to share and understand in a way that us city folks just can't get.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The highs are so high. There are great seasons, and that's, you ride those highs, but the lows can be really low, and you can do everything right from a business plan point of view. And we all know that business plans never withstand contact with reality, but you can do all the planning you want. You can execute. You can have your stocking rates right. I'm not going to get technical here, but Mother Nature throws a curveball that's totally out of your control, or the market, dips and the price that you thought you'd get for cattle or wool or whatever is, it just drops. These are all the pressures that farming families deal with. So yeah, it is hard to talk about that stuff with people who don't really live it or understand it. So yeah, again, it's definitely an up and down business journey. It's a tough, I think farmers are some of the toughest business people you ever meet. Who else, what other industry would deal with what we deal with and still show up to work the next day? Who would do that? It's crazy. If you apply it to any other industry, a trade, for example, who would do that? It's like you turn up to work one day and all your tools have just burnt down because of something totally out of your control, and you got to start again, and you do it again next year and it happens again. But then you have a good year and then all of a sudden customers decide they're not going to pay you $100 an hour. They're only paying $50 an hour. And that's happening across your industry. And you can't, so when you apply this to other industries, it's quite extraordinary. And so, yeah, I think what farmers deal with is incredible. I think they're some of the most incredibly, strong business people you'll ever meet. But, this is also a lifestyle, right? You live where you work where you live, and it's a choice. It is a choice. Everyone's got a choice. And it's a choice to show up. And often you hope the pros outweigh the cons. And that's, I guess, the only thing I would say on that is the people that keep going is the pros outweigh the cons. So, yeah.
Steph, can you tell us about the community? How does it work?
So our program,
Mhm.
Yeah. So our program is a 6-week online program for rural mums across 3 age groups. So rural women with kids aged 0 to 3, 4 to 10, 11 to 18. We take them through a 6-week program. They're personally, we match make them into a group of 10 rural mums max. Every week has a different theme, might be matrescence, relationships, self-care, whatever it might be. We take them through our program with a trained facilitator who's also a rural mum. And at the end of it, that virtual village stays on as its own independent mothers group. And, to date, we've had so many of our virtual villages say that they've caught up for a girls' weekend away. They've travelled from around the country because you're not matched with women locally necessarily. It's from all around the country, and they've gone away for a girls' weekend somewhere, which is pretty special. So that's our program. We also, have a range of other things we do. We offer scholarships for rural women struggling financially. If there are any businesses out there listening that happen to work in the health space, so whether you support the health of women and mothers mentally or physically, we've launched a platform called Motherland Connect, which is also about bridging the divide between city and country. So women are really struggling to access health services, everything from psychology to nutrition, fitness, relationship counselling, you name it, DV support, whatever it might be. And so this platform is for businesses to list their services so that women, rural mums like me, can search by postcode or telehealth and be automatically connected to these businesses around the country that can support them. And events is a big one. We're really trying to connect our community physically. So every year we're starting to host more and more fundraising events to get these rural women off the farm and celebrating together.
I imagine even that could be a challenge for some of these ladies, whether it be a financial challenge or just a distance and physical challenge to get where you need to go. Is some of that also then supported by an online opportunity for them to catch up outside of the program so that they can still be a part of those live events that you're having?
At the moment, our program is all online. Our events are in person, and that's like a really strategic thing. Is everything we do is so digital. It's how can we also have those physical opportunities? We held our first national conference in Tassie this year. We had over 250 mums from as far as WA and the Northern Territory come. It took a year of planning. It probably was in their diaries for a year. It's hard enough as a parent to find the time for yourself for a holiday, but they made the effort, and we're going to hold our next one. Not going to reveal any details anytime soon, but we're working on our next national conference. And in the meantime, this year we hosted a fundraiser in Gundawindi, Queensland, Kangaroo Island, South Australia, and Spring Ridge in New South Wales, which, we brought over 500 women together, which is amazing. So, we're very excited for the events as well. And I think that rural women deserve to get off the farm where they can and connect physically as well.
Steph, how do you make it all work? You're a busy mum, you have a business, you're a farmer, you're doing your thing, and you're also doing this. How do you fit it all in a way that's sustainable for you?
I don't know. I get asked this a lot. I certainly don't like to paint myself as some sort of super mum. I hate that word. I hate it. The amount of people said, "Oh my God, you're super mum. How do you do it all?" I think something's always got to give.
Yep.
I think that when you're excelling in one part of your life, you're dropping the ball in others. And it's taken me a couple of years to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
So my focus, quite honestly, is motherland and my family, which is my husband and my 2 kids. I have dropped the ball on my social life. I have, dropped the ball on friendships. I have dropped the ball on hobbies. My veggie patch, which I'm very passionate about, is struggling a little bit at the moment. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You can't do it all. I don't care whether you're a man or a woman, a mum or a dad. no one can do it all. There is not a man out there who's killing it in their career and killing it as a husband and a father and a mate and and hobbies. No one, male, female, it doesn't matter. And so I think that's something that we need to just accept. And so how I manage it is I prioritize, and motherland and my family are my priority right now. And yes, it sucks that other areas of my life, including my fitness, at the moment, I wish I had more time to work on my own fitness.
Yeah.
But that will come. It's not the season for me. My kids are 5 and 3. And that my time will come. And I think I put my energy where my heart and my passion lies. And with Motherland, I'm at a bull at a gate. It's my passion. It's my third baby. It's making a difference. We lost my mother-in-law to cancer a couple of months ago, and that was a real wake-up call for us of just how precious and short life is. And so, you never know when your time's going to be up. And for me, it's like, well, I just want to create impact, and I want to have a life that meant something beyond myself. Yeah. And I think that we live in an age where everyone is very selfish. Not everyone, but a lot of people are very selfish, and they care more about themselves than other people, and they care more about money and just items, just shit you don't need, that no one cares about. You might give them a like on Instagram. We've all done that, but you move on with your life. They don't care about them.
That's right.
But they're just so obsessed with their own bubble and with them. And I don't want to be that. Mm-hmm. And so for me, Motherland is a really beautiful way for me to feel like I'm doing something outside of myself. And it's working, and I love it. And the balance is a bit off in other areas of my life, but I'll get it back when time's right and when I feel like it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Motherhood is a season and has so many seasons inside of it. And you're right, it ebbs and flows, and you find the balance for the time that you're in, I think is very, very true. Steph, where to for Motherland from here?
Mm-hmm. It's funny. People said, oh, did you ever imagine it would be where it is now? 5 years ago, it'll be 5 years in December since I started it just as a simple podcast from my kitchen table. We've just hit 1 million downloads.
Wow.
It's incredible. Plus the program, the scholarship fund, the event. I released my book last year called Motherland. I didn't plan any of it. And I think that's important. I think we also place pressure on businesses to have all the answers, to have our 10-year goals, our 5-year plan. I just lead with my heart. Yes, I've got my plans, my budgets, my forecasting, all of that. I've got my bucket list. That's not for anyone else's, eyes and ears just yet. But I'm also really big on just following my gut and my heart. And that's what's worked with Motherland so far. And that's what I'll continue to do. There's a lot more work to be done. My goal is to have every single rural mum in this country connected to Motherland in some way, and at least aware that we exist. The amount of women who say to me when I go and speak at events, oh my God, where were you 2 years ago when I had my second? I didn't know about you. So even podcasts like this is really important, because we don't have some big budget to throw at marketing. And so we rely on word of mouth. We have literally grown into a community of over 20,000 rural mums by word of mouth. And so that's exciting, and social media and the power of brand awareness and activities like doing this podcast. So who knows where to from here? Sky's the limit, and there's a lot more work to be done. And I'd love to support rural dads at some point in the future as well. And we'll just see how it all goes.
Steph, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for making some time for me this morning. We're going to include all of the links that you might want to go and find out more about Steph and Motherland in the show notes. Steph, I do have one question for you. As a city dweller, is there a way that we can support Motherland so that rural mums have more opportunity to be connected to you?
Absolutely. First of all, listen to the podcast. The podcast is not just for rural women. Extraordinary stories. My dad listens to it, and he's in Sydney, and he's 86 years old. Listen to the podcast. You can donate through the website, buy my book, and just follow us on socials. We do some pretty amazing things, and it's not just for rural women. That's our core focus. But our storytelling and our impact, our events is for anyone that wants to support us.
Wonderful opportunity to get involved. Thank you so much, Steph.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.